The arrival. The void between stars had witnessed many empires rise and fall, but none had endured like the Sovereignty Collective. For 15,000 years, they had expanded across the galaxy, bringing order to chaos and civilization to barbarism. 50,000 star systems bowed to their authority. 8,000 species called them master. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. Their technology had evolved beyond the comprehension of most spacefaring races. They were inevitable. They were eternal. They were unstoppable. Supreme Commander Voth stood aboard the bridge of the Celestial Hammer, his flagship and the pride of the Collective's 3rd Expeditionary Force. He was a being of impressive stature, standing nearly 3 meters tall with crystalline skin that refracted light in subtle patterns. His species, the Corinthians, had been among the founding races of the Collective 12 millennia ago. They were natural warriors, blessed with 4 powerful arms and sensory organs that could detect the electromagnetic spectrum far beyond what most species perceived. His eyes, which glowed with a soft amber luminescence, surveyed the tactical display before him with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. 300 warships hung in formation behind the Celestial Hammer. Each vessel represented the pinnacle of collective engineering, capable of glassing a planet's surface in hours or breaking through any known defensive system. Voth had commanded this fleet for 70 years, bringing 43 species into the Collective's embrace. Some had come willingly, seduced by promises of protection and prosperity. Others had resisted and been crushed beneath the weight of superior firepower. The result was always the same. Integration was inevitable. Today's target was a young species that called themselves humans. They had emerged from a small blue world in an unremarkable system on the outer edge of the galaxy's Orion Spur. According to collective intelligence, they had achieved faster-than-light travel only 350 years ago. In that brief time, they had established colonies on 18 worlds within 100 light-years of their homeworld. Their technology was primitive by collective standards, barely worthy of classification as a Type 1.8 civilization. Their military consisted of approximately 50 warships, scattered across their territory in a thin defensive net that wouldn't stop a determined pirate raid, let alone a collective expeditionary force. Voth's tactical officer, a multi-limbed sectari named Drex, chittered softly as he updated the combat projections. The sound was his species' equivalent of satisfied anticipation. Supreme Commander, we have completed our scan of the human defensive positions. They have 32 vessels in orbit around their homeworld, 12 more distributed among their colony systems, and 6 patrol ships conducting routine operations in the outer system. Total opposition force, 50 vessels, none exceeding cruiser class. Their weapons systems? Voth asked, though he already knew the answer. Collective intelligence was thorough. Primitive kinetic accelerators, basic energy weapons, and conventional fusion warheads. Their shields are adequate against natural radiation and micrometeor impacts, but would collapse under sustained fire from our smallest corvettes. Estimated time to complete subjugation, 4 to 6 hours with minimal collective casualties. Voth made a gesture of acknowledgement with his upper left arm. We shall offer them the submission mandate first. Protocol must be observed. If they surrender peacefully, they will be integrated as Category 3 citizens and assigned appropriate labor duties. If they resist, we will demonstrate the consequences of defying the Collective. From her station near the communications array, Emissary Kale bowed her elegant head. She was Vothian, a species known for their diplomatic acumen and empathic abilities. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer in the bridge's ambient light, and her voice carried harmonics that most species found soothing. She had delivered the submission mandate to 67 species during her century of service. 67 species had accepted, some quickly, others after witnessing a demonstration of collective power. I have prepared the transmission, Supreme Commander. The humans have been monitoring our approach for the past 6 hours. They know we are here. They know what we represent. Then let us not keep them waiting. Begin transmission. The holographic communication system flickered to life, projecting Kale's image across the vast distance to Earth. On the surface of that small blue world, in an underground complex designed to survive nuclear war, the Unified Planetary Assembly gathered in emergency session. 200 representatives from every nation and colony world sat in a circular chamber that had been built with this exact scenario in mind. Humanity had always known they might not be alone in the universe. They had prepared for first contact, though their preparations had imagined diplomacy and cultural exchange, not warships and ultimatums. The hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, life-sized and eerily realistic. Kale's silver features regarded the assembled humans with an expression that might have been sympathy. She spoke, and the collective's translation matrix rendered her words in every human language simultaneously. People of Earth and her colonies, I am Emissary Kale of the Sovereignty Collective. I bring you greetings from the Council of Harmonious Integration and an opportunity that comes to all species who reach beyond their birth world. The collective has existed for 15,000 of your years. We bring order to the galaxy. We protect our members from the chaos that would otherwise consume them. We offer you a place within our great society. Around the chamber, human faces showed a mixture of hope and dread. President Elena Vasquez of the Unified Planetary Government leaned forward in her seat, her weathered face betraying nothing of the fear that gripped her heart. Emissary Kale, we thank you for your greeting. Humanity has long dreamed of joining a galactic community. We would welcome the opportunity to establish diplomatic relations and cultural exchange with the Sovereignty Collective. Kale's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested sadness. I fear there has been a misunderstanding. This is not a negotiation. This is the delivery of the submission mandate, a formal decree that has been issued to all spacefaring species encountered by the collective. Under the authority of the Council of Harmonious Integration, you are required to accept the following terms immediately. First, all military vessels and installations will be surrendered to collective authority within 72 hours. Second, all weapons research and development will cease permanently. Third, you will accept collective governors on all your worlds to oversee your integration into our society. Fourth, your population will be assigned labor and service duties as determined by collective economic planning. Fifth, you will pay tribute in the form of resources, manufactured goods, and personnel as required. These terms are non-negotiable. Compliance is mandatory. The chamber erupted. Shouts of anger and disbelief echoed off the walls. Some representatives wept openly. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just heard. President Vasquez raised her hand, calling for order, but it took several minutes before the chaos subsided enough for her to speak. Emissary Kale, what you describe is not integration. It is enslavement. Humanity is a free people. We have fought too long and sacrificed too much to accept chains, no matter how technologically advanced the hands that offer them. Your emotional response is understandable, Kale replied with that same terrible sympathy. 8,000 species have stood where you stand now. 8,000 species have expressed similar sentiments. All of them eventually accepted the reality of their situation. The Sovereignty Collective is not cruel, but we are inevitable. You cannot fight us. You cannot hide from us. Your only choice is whether you accept the mandate peacefully or after we demonstrate the futility of resistance. I have delivered this decree to species far more advanced than your own. All of them submitted. You will too. And if we refuse? Asked General Marcus Webb, commander of Earth's Orbital Defense Network. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the armrests of his chair hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Then Supreme Commander Voth will reduce your orbital infrastructure to debris. Your colonies will be occupied by force. Your population will be reduced to a manageable size through selective elimination. Those who survive will serve under far harsher conditions than those who surrender peacefully. The collective does not desire this outcome, but we have performed such corrections 43 times in the past millennium. Your resistance would be brief, bloody, and ultimately meaningless. In the back of the chamber, partially obscured by shadows, sat Admiral Sarah Chin. She was 68 years old, though her fit frame and sharp eyes suggested someone decades younger. She had served in the Terran Space Force for 46 years, rising through the ranks during humanity's rapid expansion into space. She had commanded survey missions to the outer colonies. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belts. She had overseen the construction of humanity's defensive networks. And she had kept the most important secret in human history for the past 27 years. Admiral Chin stood slowly, drawing the attention of the chamber. She walked with measured steps toward the center, her uniform immaculate, her expression unreadable. When she spoke, her voice carried a calm authority that seemed to cut through the panic like a blade. Emissary Kale, your mandate is clear and we appreciate your directness. However, a decision of this magnitude cannot be made hastily. We request time to consult among ourselves to debate the terms you have offered, and to prepare an appropriate response. Kale tilted her head, studying the human admiral with her empathic senses. She detected no fear in this one, only a strange, steely resolve. Curious. How much time do you require? 96 hours. 4 of our days. Surely the Sovereignty Collective, which has existed for 15 millennia, can grant us 4 days to make the most important decision in our species' history. On the celestial hammer, Voth listened to this exchange with growing impatience. He gestured to Kale with 2 of his arms, indicating she should deny the request. They had already wasted enough time on ceremonial protocols. But Kale, following her diplomatic instincts, made a different calculation. A species that surrendered after careful deliberation was less likely to cause problems during integration than one that was conquered at gunpoint. 96 hours, Kale agreed. But understand this, Admiral Chin. The mandate will not change. Your compliance is not optional. Use this time wisely. Consider the lives that will be saved by peaceful surrender. Consider the future your species could have as part of the collective, rather than as a cautionary tale of foolish resistance. The hologram flickered and vanished. For a long moment, the chamber remained silent. Then President Vasquez turned to Admiral Chen with barely contained fury. Admiral, what are you doing? 4 days won't change anything. They have 300 warships. We have 50. They have technology 15,000 years more advanced than ours. We need to discuss terms of surrender that might preserve some dignity, some autonomy, some hope for our people. Chen looked at the president, then slowly scanned the faces of every representative in the chamber. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. Madam President, members of the Assembly, I understand your fear. I share it. But I did not request time to discuss surrender. I requested time to prepare our response. What response? Demanded Minister of Defense Harold Kim. You heard them. We cannot win this fight. We cannot win with 50 ships, Chin agreed. That is why we will not fight with 50 ships. The confused murmurs that followed this statement were cut short when Chin pulled a small device from her pocket and pressed a sequence of buttons. Throughout the chamber, secure holographic displays materialized in front of key military and government leaders. What they saw made their faces go pale. 91 years ago, Chin said softly, humanity encountered another spacefaring species. We called them the Swarm. They were insectoid, numerous, and utterly hostile. They attacked 3 of our colony worlds without warning or provocation. In 2 weeks, 4 million humans died. Our fleet fought them desperately and managed to drive them back, but only because the Swarm inexplicably withdrew. To this day we don't know why they left. Maybe they found easier prey. Maybe we hurt them more than we realized. It doesn't matter. What matters is the lesson we learned. She paused, letting her words sink in. We learned that the universe is not safe. We learned that hope for peace must be balanced with preparation for war. We learned that humanity's survival cannot depend on the mercy of others. And so, in secret, with resources diverted from every sector of our economy, with sacrifices that our people made without even knowing what they were sacrificing for, we prepared. Chin pressed another button. The holographic displays updated, showing ship designs, construction facilities, resource allocations, and deployment schedules that span 9 decades. We built a real fleet. A hidden fleet. One that the Sovereignty Collective knows nothing about. Because the 50 ships they can see were never meant to win a war. They were meant to be seen while we prepared for this exact moment. President Vasquez stared at the data scrolling before her eyes, unable to believe what she was seeing. How many ships? Admiral Chin smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Enough. More than enough. We have 96 hours to deploy them and to send a message to the Sovereignty Collective that will echo across this galaxy for the next 15,000 years. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity does not surrender. And anyone who forgets that lesson will pay a price they cannot imagine. She turned to face the chamber, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. The emissary said that 8,000 species submitted to the mandate. She said all of them eventually accepted reality. Well, we are about to teach the Sovereignty Collective a new reality. Supreme Commander Voth expects an easy victory. He expects us to beg for mercy. He expects us to join the long list of broken species that learned too late that resistance is futile. Admiral Chen's voice rose, filling the chamber with steel and fire. Let's show them what happens when humanity says no. The revelation. The 96 hours passed like a countdown to the end of the world. Across human space, from the crowded habitats of Earth to the frozen mining colonies of the Kuiper Belt, people watched the skies and waited. News networks broadcast endless speculation about humanity's fate. Religious leaders held vigils in packed temples, churches, and mosques. Parents held their children closer. Lovers made promises they weren't sure they could keep. The Sovereignty Collective fleet hung in space like a sword suspended over humanity's neck, waiting for the deadline to expire. Aboard the Celestial Hammer, Supreme Commander Voth reviewed the final tactical assessments with the satisfaction of a predator watching wounded prey. His intelligence officers had spent the past 4 days conducting comprehensive scans of human space. They had catalogued every ship, every station, every defensive platform. The numbers hadn't changed. 50 human vessels against 300 collective warships. The outcome was mathematically certain. The humans have been surprisingly quiet, observed Drex, his multiple limbs tapping against his console in rhythmic patterns. Our sensors detect increased communications traffic between their worlds, but they have made no hostile movements. Several of their ships have actually withdrawn from forward positions, retreating toward the inner system. They appear to be consolidating their forces around their homeworld. Voth nodded with 2 of his heads. A sensible defensive posture, though ultimately futile. They concentrate their strength to make one final stand, hoping perhaps to inflict enough casualties that we might negotiate. It is a strategy we have seen before. It never works. He turned to Emissary Kale, who stood nearby with her hands folded in a gesture of patient waiting. Has there been any communication from the humans? Any indication they might surrender before the deadline? Kale's empathic senses had been extended toward Earth for days, trying to read the emotional currents of humanity's leadership. What she detected troubled her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Fear certainly. Anger absolutely. But underneath those expected emotions ran something else, something she had rarely encountered in species facing the submission mandate. It felt like anticipation. Like grim satisfaction. Like a trap about to spring shut. No communication, Supreme Commander. But I sense something unusual in their emotional state. They are afraid but not despairing. They are preparing for something, though I cannot determine what. Preparing to die with dignity, no doubt, Voth said dismissively. It is admirable in its way. We shall honor their courage by making their end swift. He gestured to his weapons officer, a hulking Torgathi whose species had been bred for warfare. Charge all weapon systems. Once the deadline expires, we begin with their orbital infrastructure. Disable their communication satellites, destroy their defensive platforms, eliminate their command stations. We shall demonstrate our power clearly before offering them one final chance to surrender. If they still refuse, we proceed to surface bombardment of military targets. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated through decades of service together. Voth had commanded this fleet long enough that his officers anticipated his orders before he gave them. They were veterans of dozens of integration campaigns. This would be no different than the others. The clock counted down the final minutes. 3 minutes. 2 minutes. 1 minute. The deadline arrived. Voth opened his mouth to give the attack order. Before he could speak, every sensor on the celestial hammer screamed a warning simultaneously. Drex's limbs froze mid-motion, his eyes widening in disbelief as data flooded his displays. Supreme Commander, we are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They are appearing everywhere. Behind us. Around us. They are. Space itself seemed to tear open. From hollowed asteroids that had been carved out over decades, from beneath the ice of Europa and Enceladus, from inside the swirling clouds of Jupiter and Saturn, from hidden construction bays on the dark side of Luna, from facilities buried deep within Mars, from the Kuiper Belt beyond, they came. Warships. Thousands of warships. They emerged in perfect formation, their hulls dark as the void itself, running lights glowing the color of human blood. Each vessel bore the insignia of the Terran Space Force, but these were not the primitive cruisers the collective had catalogued. These were predators, designed by a species that had spent 91 years preparing for exactly this moment. Drex's voice cracked as he read the numbers scrolling across his screens. Supreme Commander, I am counting 5,247 vessels. Multiple ship classes, ranging from frigate to dreadnought. They have us completely surrounded. Energy signatures indicate active weapons systems, charged shields, and targeting locks on every ship in our fleet. Supreme Commander, they have us in a kill box. The bridge of the Celestial Hammer fell silent except for the electronic chirping of various alert systems. Voth stared at the tactical display, his crystalline skin flickering through colors that indicated deep shock among his species. 5,000 ships. The humans had 5,000 warships, and the collective hadn't detected a single one until this moment. It was impossible. It defied every intelligence assessment, every sensor sweep, every projection. And yet there they were, surrounding his fleet like wolves circling prey. A communication request came through from one of the human vessels, a massive dreadnought that had emerged from behind Luna. Voth gestured numbly for Kale to accept it. The holographic display flickered to life, and Admiral Sarah Chin appeared before them. She was not on Earth's surface any longer. She stood on the bridge of a warship, surrounded by officers who looked at their screens with the calm focus of trained warriors. Behind her, through the viewport, Voth could see hundreds of human vessels in perfect formation. "Supreme Commander Voth," Chin said, her voice carrying none of the fear or desperation he had expected. "I am Admiral Sarah Chin, Commander of the Terran Defense Fleet. I am here to deliver humanity's formal response to your submission mandate." Voth found his voice, though it came out harsher than he intended. "Admiral Chin, you have been hiding a fleet from us. An impressive deception, I admit. But do not let numbers give you false confidence. The Sovereignty Collective has fought wars against species far more advanced than your own. We have." "We decline," Chin interrupted, her words cutting through his speech like a blade. "We decline your mandate. We decline your authority. We decline your protection, your governance, and your presence in our space. Humanity will not surrender. We will not disarm. We will not serve. We are a free people and we intend to remain free. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." The sheer audacity of her words left Voth momentarily speechless. Emissary Kale stepped forward, her empathic senses reeling from the intensity of emotion radiating from the human admiral. "Admiral Chin, please understand what you are saying. The Sovereignty Collective has existed for 15,000 years. We have integrated 8,000 species. We have never been successfully resisted. What you are proposing is suicide. Your ships may outnumber ours in this moment, but we have fleets beyond counting. We have weapons that can crack planets. We have resources that dwarf your entire civilization. You cannot win this war." Chen's expression softened slightly, and for a moment she looked almost sympathetic. "Emissary Kale, I believe you are sincere in your concern. I believe you genuinely think you are offering us a better future than the one we would have otherwise. But you fundamentally misunderstand who we are and what we have experienced. 91 years ago we encountered a species called the Swarm. They attacked us without warning. They killed 4 million of our people in 2 weeks. We barely survived that encounter and we learned a terrible lesson. We learned that in this universe safety is an illusion. Protection is a lie told by the strong to control the weak. And the only thing that ensures survival is the willingness to fight for it, no matter the cost." She paused, letting her words sink in. "For 91 years we prepared for this day. We built these ships in secret, diverting resources from every sector of our economy. We train crews in facilities that don't appear on any map. We develop technology specifically designed to counter species more advanced than ourselves. We watched the galaxy, studied every conflict we could observe, learned from every species that fell to empires like yours. And we made a collective decision as a species that we would never, ever kneel before anyone." Chen's eyes hardened, and her voice took on an edge of steel. "You say we cannot win this war. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps the Sovereignty Collective's full might would eventually overwhelm us. But here's what you need to understand, Supreme Commander. We don't need to win. We just need to make it cost more than we're worth. We need to make every system you take bleed you dry. We need to make every victory so expensive that your own people begin to question whether integrating us was worth the price." She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display on the celestial hammer updated with new information. It showed detailed schematics of collective ship designs, annotated with weak points, system vulnerabilities and tactical assessments. "For 91 years we've been studying you. We know your ship classes. We know your tactics. We know your formation doctrines. We've analyzed every military engagement the collective has fought in the past 500 years that we could observe from our corner of space. We've built our entire military strategy around defeating you specifically." Voth felt something he hadn't experienced in 7 decades of military service. "You felt fear. You are bluffing. You may have surprised us with your numbers, but quantity does not equal quality. Our ships are superior to yours in every measurable way." "Are they?" Chin asked mildly. She pressed a control on her armrest. "All vessels, execute demonstration protocol Alpha." Around the collective fleet, 100 human ships simultaneously fired their weapons. But they didn't fire at the collective vessels. Instead, they targeted specific points in space, empty coordinates that seemed to have no tactical significance. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Energy beams lanced through the void. And then, in those seemingly empty spaces, something appeared. Debris. Wreckage. The shattered remains of objects that hadn't been there a moment before. Drex stared at his sensors in horror. They destroyed our stealth reconnaissance drones. All of them. Supreme Commander, they've been tracking assets we didn't even know they had detected. Our entire intelligence network in this system has been compromised. Chin continued as if nothing had happened. We have been aware of your surveillance drones since you entered our space 4 days ago. We allowed them to continue operating because we wanted you to see exactly what we wanted you to see. Our 50 primitive warships. Our inadequate defenses. We wanted you to feel confident. We wanted you to be certain of easy victory. Because that certainty is what brought you here with only 300 ships instead of 3,000. She leaned forward in her command chair, her eyes locked on Voth's. Let me tell you about human military doctrine, Supreme Commander. We call it asymmetric warfare. When faced with a superior enemy, you don't fight them on their terms. You don't line up in neat formations and trade shots until the stronger side wins. You use deception. You use misdirection. You hit them where they're weak. You make them afraid. You make them doubt. You make them bleed. As if on cue, the space around the collective fleet suddenly filled with thousands of small objects. They weren't ships. They were drones, unmanned and expendable, each one carrying enough explosive force to cripple a cruiser. They swarmed toward the collective formation like angry insects, moving with erratic patterns that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Defensive fire. Voth shouted. All ships engage those drones. The collective fleet opened fire, their advanced targeting systems trying to track and destroy the incoming swarm. They succeeded in eliminating hundreds of drones, then thousands. But for every one they destroyed, 10 more took its place. And while the collective ships focused on the drone swarm, the human warships opened fire with their primary weapons. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The human ships didn't use energy weapons exclusively as most advanced species did. Instead, they employed a devastating combination of technologies. Kinetic kill vehicles accelerated to relativistic speeds, striking shields with the force of small nuclear weapons. Electromagnetic pulse warheads detonated in precisely calculated patterns, overloading collective shield generators. Fusion torpedoes found gaps in the defensive formations and detonated inside the fleet, their thermal pulses cooking nearby ships from the inside out. But most terrifying of all were the weapons the humans called needle drivers. They fired streams of magnetically accelerated projectiles no larger than a grain of rice, each one traveling at 90% of light speed. Individually, they were too small to trigger most targeting systems. Collectively, they shredded through shields and armor like tissue paper. A single needle driver could fire 10,000 rounds per second. The human fleet had thousands of needle drivers. The celestial hammer's shields flared and buckled under the onslaught. Voth watched in horror as 3 of his heavy cruisers simply disintegrated, their hulls torn apart by weapons that should have been too primitive to threaten collective armor. Another ship took a kinetic kill vehicle amidships, the impact breaking its spine and sending both halves tumbling through space. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers throughout his formation. Return fire. Voth commanded desperately. All ships return fire. The collective fleet responded with the fury of 15,000 years of military superiority. Energy beams capable of slicing through planetary crust lanced toward human ships. Plasma torpedoes hot enough to melt continents streaked through the void. Gravitational disruptors tried to tear human vessels apart at the molecular level. And some of their shots found targets. Human ships died, their hulls rupturing, their crews lost to the vacuum. But for every human ship that fell, 3 collective vessels died in return. It wasn't just the weapons that made the difference. It was the tactics. The human fleet moved like a living thing, ships covering each other, rotating damaged vessels out of the line of fire, concentrating firepower on isolated targets. They used the asteroids and debris in the system as cover, firing from unexpected angles. They deployed electronic warfare systems that jammed collective communications and disrupted targeting solutions. They used the collective's own numerical disadvantage against them, forcing Voth's ships into formations where they risked hitting each other with their own fire. Admiral Chin watched the battle unfold with the calm focus of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. Her tactical officers called out updates in steady voices, reporting damage, coordinating fleet movements, directing fire. Around her, the bridge crew worked with machine-like efficiency. They had trained for this. They had simulated this. They had wargamed every possible scenario. And now, finally, they were proving that humanity's 91 years of preparation had not been in vain. Enemy flagship taking heavy damage, reported her weapons officer. Their shields are at 43% and falling. All dreadnoughts, concentrate fire on the celestial hammer, Chin ordered. Let's send Supreme Commander Voth a message he can't ignore. 6 human dreadnoughts, each one a mobile fortress bristling with weapons, turned their full attention to Voth's flagship. The combined firepower was staggering. The celestial hammer's shields collapsed entirely, leaving its hull exposed to direct fire. Explosions tore through its lower decks. Atmosphere vented into space. Systems failed throughout the ship. On the celestial hammer's bridge, chaos reigned. Drex was shouting damage reports, his multiple limbs flying across his console as he tried to maintain some semblance of control. Shields down. Hull breaches on decks 9 through 17. We've lost main power to the port weapons array. Propulsion is failing. Emissary Kale stood frozen, her empathic senses overwhelmed by the death and terror flooding through the collective fleet. Hundreds of her fellow officers were dying. Thousands more were terrified, their certainty of victory shattered. She had never felt anything like this. The collective didn't lose battles. The collective didn't retreat. The collective didn't fail. Voth's crystalline skin had turned a dull gray, the color of shock and defeat among his people. He stared at the tactical display as his fleet fell apart around him. In 20 minutes of combat, he had lost 97 ships. 97 vessels, each one representing decades of construction and millions of credits of resources, simply gone. Another 40 were too damaged to continue fighting. His fleet was dying and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Supreme Commander, Drex said quietly, we must retreat. If we stay, we will all die. The word retreat tasted like poison in Voth's mouth. In 70 years of service he had never spoken that word. The collective did not retreat. The collective did not surrender. But as he watched another heavy cruiser explode on his tactical display, he realized he had no choice. Pride meant nothing if his entire fleet was destroyed. All ships, he said, his voice hollow. Execute emergency withdrawal. Jump to rally point Theta 7. Now. The surviving collective ships disengaged, their faster-than-light drives charging as quickly as their damaged systems allowed. The human fleet could have pressed the attack, could have destroyed more of them as they fled. But Chin raised her hand, signaling her ships to hold fire. Let them go, she said quietly. We've made our point. One by one, the collective ships vanished in flashes of exotic energy as they jumped away. In 30 minutes it was over. Where 300 collective warships had hung in space like an executioner's blade, now there was only debris in the dying light of cooling wrecks. The human fleet held position, their weapons still active, their shields still raised, waiting to see if the enemy would return. Admiral Chin opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, status report. The responses came in over the next several minutes. Humanity had lost 43 vessels and another 78 were damaged to varying degrees. 3,214 crew members had died in the battle. Each loss was a tragedy, each name a person who would never see their families again. But they had won. Against impossible odds, against an empire that had conquered 8,000 species, humanity had won. Chin closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those losses settle on her shoulders. Then she opened them again, her expression resolute. Broadcast the following message on all frequencies, including those we know the collective monitors. Make sure every species in this part of the galaxy hears it. She waited while the communications officer set up the broadcast, then began to speak. Her words would be recorded, translated, and distributed across thousands of worlds. To the Sovereignty Collective and to all who hear this message. Today humanity was given a choice between freedom and servitude. We were told that resistance was futile, that surrender was inevitable, that we could not win. We were told that 8,000 species had submitted to the mandate, and that we would be the 8,001st. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the conviction of every human who had worked in secret for 91 years to prepare for this day. We said no. We said that humanity does not kneel. We said that our freedom is not negotiable, our sovereignty is not for sale, and our future is ours to determine. The Sovereignty Collective came to our space with 300 warships and absolute confidence in their superiority. They left with less than 200 ships and the knowledge that humanity will fight for every inch of our territory, for every one of our people, for every moment of our independence. She paused, letting her words echo across the stars. To the other species of this galaxy, to those who submitted and to those who still resist, we say this: you are not alone. You are not helpless. You are not destined to serve. If humanity, a young species barely 3 centuries old in space, can stand against an empire 15,000 years old, then anyone can. The age of unchallenged empires is over. The age of forced integration is over. A new age is beginning, An age where species have the right to determine their own fate. She looked directly at the camera, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. And to the Sovereignty Collective we say this with absolute clarity: do not come back. Do not test us again. Do not assume that this was a fluke or a lucky victory. We have been preparing for this moment for nearly a century. We are ready for you. And if you return, we will teach you the same lesson again and again until you finally learn it. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity will not kneel. And anyone who forgets that fact will pay a price measured in blood and steel. The transmission ended. Across human space, from Earth to the furthest colonies, people watched the aftermath of the battle and wept with relief. They had survived. Against all odds, against an empire that had conquered thousands of species, they had survived. More than that, they had won. But Admiral Chin knew this was just the beginning. The Sovereignty Collective would not accept this defeat without response. They would regroup, reorganize, and return with more ships and harder resolve. But humanity would be ready. They had spent 91 years preparing for the first battle. They would spend however long it took preparing for the next one. She looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness filled with threats and wonders in equal measure. Somewhere out there, Supreme Commander Voth was limping back to his superiors with the unthinkable news that humanity had defeated a collective expeditionary force. The news would spread. Other empires would hear. Other species would take notice. Some would see humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Others would see them as an inspiration, proof that resistance was possible. The galaxy had changed today. The Sovereignty Collective's reputation of invincibility had been shattered, and humanity had announced its presence on the galactic stage not with a whisper, but with thunder. Admiral Sarah Chin smiled grimly and turned back to her crew. Stand down from combat alert. Rotate damaged ships back for repairs. And begin deploying our sensor networks. The collective will be back, maybe not today or tomorrow, but they'll be back. And when they come, we'll be waiting. The Terran Defense Fleet held position in the void, 5,000 ships standing guard over humanity's future. They had fought their first battle. They had proven they could stand against empires. And they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had arrived. And the universe would never be the same.